right, thanks everybody. This is Shirley Bittling-Meyer. I'm a member of the President's Advisory Committee on the Status of Women, otherwise known as PACSAW. This is a program that we have sponsored for a number of years. We're still trying to determine how long. I think it's been at least 7 or 8 years that we've had the Women We Admire series. PACSAW works to improve the climate and opportunities for women here at OP, and we currently have about 33 members. We will be recruiting for new members starting in January, so you'll start to see some articles in Link and some other notices and announcements. So if you're interested, please add your name to the sign. For those that are in the room, add your name to the sign-up list, and you might want to put interested in membership. And then I know for one for sure that I will make sure you're on our special distribution list when we start our recruitment. And then for those on the phone, we have you muted, and we will have time for questions for Jamie at the end of her speaking engagement here. So then we will unmute you. You can also, if there's issues with audio or anything that you're having issues with in terms of Zoom, please use the chat function, and we have somebody who's monitoring that. So with that, again, and those that are interested, if you're on the phone, you can go to our website, which is ucop.edu/PACSAW, and you can get some more information on the other events and activities that we have that we sponsor for OP. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Deanna Berg, who is going to introduce our speaker for today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Jaime Nack. Ms. Nack is the president of 3 Squares, Inc. It's an award-winning consultancy that specializes in developing comprehensive sustainability plans for corporate, government, and nonprofit entities. In this role, she speaks to audiences around the world about the business case for sustainability and its impact on the future of the global marketplace. She also proudly serves as the Vice President, Al Gore's presenters for the Climate Reality Project. She's the Director of Sustainability for the Global Climate Action Summit, which is co-chaired by California Governor Jerry Brown, Michael Bloomberg, UNFCCC's Executive Secretary, Patricia Espinoza, and Anand Mahindra, which I learned earlier is like the Bloomberg of India. In 2011, Ms. Nack was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum, and she received an appointment under the Obama administration to the National Women's Business Council. This is an advisory council to the President, Congress, and the SBA on economic issues of importance to women business owners. She has a master's in public policy from UCLA, where she also earned her bachelor's in international economics with a minor in urban planning. So please help me welcome Ms. Nack.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you to the Office of the President and to all of the team here that's worked so hard to pull this event and this series together. I took a look at some of the other speakers, and it just seems like an awesome series. And so we're going to help promote that and a couple of our networks that we have focused on women and women's leadership and women in the environment. So I'm really excited to be here today. As you know, I'm a double Bruin, so the first slide here is an image representing UCLA, which is my home in terms of the UC landscape, but I also serve as a board member of the Alumni Association, so I am definitely clued into the UC Regents and Office of the President and the activities here as well, so it's a great honor to be here with you today. All right, so what I wanted to do is just to start off, since we're here at UC headquarters, talk a little bit about my educational background. And part of the reason why I'm starting off with education instead of professional background is I really credit UCLA, my time on campus, my 6 years, undergrad and grad on campus, as my life boot camp. So a lot of the skills that I took with me and that I use daily as an entrepreneur, as a manager, as a supervisor, as a business owner, I credit back to what I learned on campus. Undergrad, I studied international economics, and I specialized in Latin America as a region. and I minored in public policy, and that was in 1998. And then I went back and received my Master's of Public Policy with a focus on international trade at what's now called the Luskin School of Public Affairs. I did do some stints at Oxford, Yale, and Harvard in the last 10 years or so, but I definitely credit the chunk of time, the 6 years on campus at UCLA, for giving me a lot of the foundational schools and the toolkit that I use on a daily basis. A lot of the fun that I had at UCLA was during my undergraduate tenure. I served as one of the elected officers. So back then, our undergrad population was about 28,000. So when we ran for elected office, it was like running for an office in a small city. You had to campaign. Back then, we didn't really have email, Facebook, websites, so we did flyers up on bulletin boards, the old school way. We actually had people on roller skates rolling around passing out flyers. But it was an honor to serve in a student government office, a USAC office called the Cultural Affairs Commission, my junior year on campus. And through that experience running cultural affairs, one of the projects that became my baby, both on campus and within the Cultural Affairs office, was producing a massive festival called the Jazz and Reggae Festival, which still exists today. Back then it was a free, so open to the community festival, and over the 3 years that I was head producer, I grew it from a 5,000 person event on campus to a 30,000 person event on campus. Now, I didn't realize what an opportunity it was for me to grow as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, to be able to have that type of responsibility to grow a music festival that was open to the community of Greater Los Angeles, and that meant networking with the radio stations, the TV stations, the artist community, booking vendors, booking corporate sponsorships, hiring staff and volunteers, motivating a large team of volunteers to work on this out of passion because we didn't have budget to pay them. But a lot of that, a lot of the budget keeping, the staffing, the hiring are things that I do on a daily basis now. I also did receive an alumni scholarship, so I want that. And then fast forward to today, now 20 years later, I am proudly serving as a board member of the Alumni Association Board of Directors for UCLA. We also have a platform that we've built out through the Alumni Association called UCLA One. How many of you have heard of UCLA One? Just curious. So it's fairly new, and one of the impetus for building out that platform was really to connect the alumni community, which at UCLA is about 500,000 plus, with current students and other alumni for networking, for job placement, for internship placement, and for mentorship. We didn't have a real way to build those bridges or connections before this. And so we built out UCLA One and started onboarding both current students and alumni onto the platform. As an alumni, you're able to check that you're open to mentor. And so as soon as I clicked open, I immediately had 4 students, current students in environmental studies, ask to be my mentee. So I've mentored 4 students, and it's been quite a rewarding experience so far. What the students tell me is that their dorm rooms today look very similar to what they did. This is a picture of my dorm room back in my freshman year at Sproul on campus. Apparently now they're triples though. So this was a double dorm room. The computers, I'm sure, look much different than what we had back then. And probably the phones also look very different. This is a picture of the UCLA Jazz and Reggae Festival in the later years. So that was when we had about 30,000 people on campus on the IM field. You'll see that it was a very diverse group, all ages, all different areas of LA represented, and it was just such an amazing opportunity to be able to curate this type of event on campus. That's an image of me with one of our keynotes. I'm calling it a keynote. Now that I produce conferences, I call them festivals. So now I'm looking at a festival and I'm calling this a keynote speaker. They were our headline talent, Supercat, which is a reggae artist from Jamaica. And then this was me being sworn in for student government back in '96. At that same swearing-in ceremony, you'll see Eric Shaw on the left there and Max Espinosa on the right. We were all served on Student Government Council the same year, and coincidentally, 20 years later, the three of us are now serving on the Alumni Association board. So there's us, me over there, Max in the middle, Eric on the other side, and that's our Alumni Association board now. So it's really neat to be able to both flash back to some of the challenges and opportunities that we discussed as a Student Government Council, as students on campus, and then discuss similar issues in a completely different landscape today with some of our student reps on the board. And that's a picture of some board members with our chancellor. All right, so that was my educational background. Where that led me to is a really amazing career that I feel very humbled and honored to have been able to grow a company for the last 10 years. So this is our 10th year in the business. My company is named 3 Squares, Inc. The 3 Squares represents the triple bottom line, or we develop strategies that have an environmental focus, a social focus, and an economic focus for our clients. After I decided to go out and leave another environmental consulting firm to launch 3 Squares, Inc., I was tapped to serve as the first ever head of sustainability or director of sustainability for the Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado. So I had to move to Denver and live there full time for 9 months back in 2008 and implement a citywide sustainability plan for an event at the time with a budget of $100 million. So you can imagine the impact that you can have if you're able to put this environmental lens or sustainability lens over that spend and really work with the city of Denver and the surrounding communities, luckily Boulder and others that had an environmental focus, to implement some strategies that still exist today. So I was back in Denver. We had an event there last year, and a lot of the systems that we implemented in 2008 still exist today, which was probably one of the most rewarding parts of my job, is seeing the legacy piece. That plan was so successful that they invited me back to lead the sustainability efforts for the 2012 Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, and then the 2016 Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. Part of what the plan, if you will, did for the events industry is it was one of the key moments where the events industry as a whole said, we could be doing something differently. We see that the building industry has developed a LEED standard, and other industries have started to develop their own standards, but the event industry really doesn't have any universal standard for how to green an event. And so I, along with others, volunteers within the industry, grouped together and started to build out a standard. There are 2 main standards that were developed. One that was more heavily developed in the US called APEX ASTM, following the LEED standard, and another one on the international landscape called ISO 2012-1. And we were the first firm, 3 Squares Inc., to be certified compliant to ISO 2012-1 in the US. And I say that because we are a small business, and a lot of times my current clients can be larger corporations, and they say, you know, is this for us? And I say, look, if we can do it, with the resources that we have, then it definitely, you can do it as a large corporation. I've also had the privilege of serving as a sustainability advisor to Al Gore's organization, the Climate Reality Project, for the past 9 years. And through that work, I travel a lot. We've implemented on all 7 continents, and our materials then have been translated into 13 languages, including Spanish, Mandarin, Portuguese, to Icelandic, Urdu, etc. And most recently, I've been spending a lot of time in San Francisco, as we heard earlier, as serving as the head of sustainability for the Global Climate Action Summit. So that summit was essentially like a mini COP, or a mini International Climate Summit, that was really headed up by Governor Brown here in California. A lot of folks around the world see California as the U.S. representative for how the U.S. feels on climate and on the Paris Agreement, and they look to the governor's office. So he teamed up with Mike Bloomberg, Anand Mahindra, the UN Climate Change Secretariat, and also a minister from China, to develop this Global Climate Action Summit. And the goal for that summit was to show that non-state actors, so even if the federal government here or elsewhere doesn't sign on to Paris or doesn't make strong commitments, that there are plenty of others, cities, states, counties, corporations that have equal or more power to do a lot in terms of climate action. So what is Three Squares Inc.? I get that question a lot. It's still, you know, the sustainability field is still, I would say, in its infancy, if not toddler stage, if you will. So the role even of Chief Sustainability Officer did not exist in a lot of companies 5 years, especially 10 years ago. So for a lot of companies or even state agencies or federal agencies, they're still trying to figure out what this role means, what type of budget is involved, what type of scope they need to work on, et cetera. So what we do is we help those organizations. We work with cities, we work with corporations and nonprofit organizations on mapping out what a sustainability plan looks like. Because we're most known for our events sustainability, partly because of this DNC being a case study, we definitely get a lot of press, and a lot of our external posts are about our events work. But about 50% of our work that we do is internally within organizations, and that's something that we don't necessarily publicize as much because it's really our clients' work. It's what our clients are doing inside the organizations to transform. Here's just a snapshot of some of the logos of current clients or past clients. We are also certified as a small business and certified as a women-owned business. So some of the different service areas that we cover, sustainable event strategy, like I said, is our most well-known one, and that's everything from taking an event through ISO 2012-1 certification to working with events that might not have the capacity to go for a full audit and certification, but they want to implement a sustainability plan, they want to implement a waste or zero waste diversion plan, they want to go carbon neutral, they want to work out a clean transportation plan. One of the things I'm really proud about at the Global Climate Action Summit is we had 100% zero emission vehicle fleet. So what that meant is our delegate transport, all the buses moving delegates around San Francisco, were 100% zero emission, and a combination of transit and school buses. So we brought some school buses down from Sacramento that were electric vehicles. And then we also had speaker transport in a combination of zero emission and hydrogen vehicles. And then our production team used electric production vans. And all of the electric vehicles were charged off of the grid in San Francisco, which is one of the cleanest grids in the world. It's 100% greenhouse gas free. But mapping out that plan that I just said took months and a lot of work by a lot of different people on the team, and a lot of partnership work between the charging infrastructure providers, you know, trying to find a place to charge a 40-foot bus in San Francisco. Even though there are chargers that are available, they might not fit a 40-foot, 10-foot high bus. So even mapping that out took a lot of work. Environmental reporting, so we always want to measure anything that we implement and be able to look for areas to improve year over year. So this is just a snapshot of a project that we did for a large corporation where we mapped out about 98 different projects that the employees submitted that would save across environmental and cost savings. And we were able to share this in the corporate report that went to the CEO of the company as well. For a lot of our projects, volunteer recruitment and management becomes a big component. So I mentioned back at UCLA, you know, we had to recruit students to do everything that we needed for the festival and all of our other projects. So being able to understand what it means to create a job description for a volunteer, to recruit them and to motivate them so that they don't quit was something that I learned at my days on campus. And this is an image of the Global Coffee Expo, which was a client of ours for a number of years. It's a massive event for about 12 to 15,000 people from all over the world, all things coffee. So if you like coffee, which I do, this was like heaven. It's also one of the few conferences that I've been to where people are wide awake all day, all day. So from the first session to the parties every night, their pupils are dilated, they're wide awake, and part of it is because people are offering them amazing coffee, espresso drinks all day long for free. So our volunteers were happy and full of energy, which was great. The sign that they're standing in front of says, "We run on coffee and volunteers," which is a really great message that the expo provided. Brand integrity. So I mentioned before we have worked with Mr. Gore for a number of years, but a lot of what we've found, especially with environmental nonprofits and the environmental community at large, is that if we want to not just preach to the choir, if we want to reach new minds and open new eyes, we need influencers that might not look and speak the environmental jargon that we're used to, right? Because we realize that, you know, we need votes, we need people to care, we need people to understand how every action that they take every day can make a difference. And so a lot of times, especially with younger generations, they're looking at the Instagram and Snapchat and other accounts of people who they like and people who they follow. And those might not be the climate scientists, right? They probably aren't the climate scientists for a lot of them. And so what we wanted to do is figure out how can we align these influencers who care about causes so that we can use their reach and their voice to reach the masses and start to affect change that way. So Pharrell Williams has been a great partner on a number of projects. There are also a number of other YouTube sensations. Prince EA is a friend who has been great in terms of messaging. I was on a trip to the Arctic with him earlier this year. There's a old Disney actress, or not old, she's still a young Disney actress, Allison Stoner, who's been awesome at sharing messages about climate. And we're actually working on the event this next week is called 24 Hours of Reality, which is an online broadcast with Vice President Gore and a number of celebrities and influencers and climate scientists online for 24 hours talking about climate change and how it hits a different hour in a different country, essentially. We're going around the world. We've done that broadcast a number of years, but it's always interesting to see the different types of influencers that we bring on that show. A couple of years ago, we started the show off with a live performance from Duran Duran, and we've had Jason Mraz and others perform on the show too from the musical guest component. And just seeing on Twitter and otherwise how we've reached so many new people who might not have even been open to the climate change message before, but they see their favorite band perform in their language too. We had Maná, who's a famous Spanish rock band, perform. We've touched a lot of different people. We've had a Korean pop band perform, and we've seen how that message is received differently, which is fantastic. I've mentioned our work on the DNC, but just in terms of numbers, we did divert 50 tons of compost over 4 days. So from a results perspective, that's about the amount that a small city would collect in a month that we collected in 4 days in Denver. And we did have to recruit and engage 1,000 Green Team volunteers. So we had these 3 bin stations staffed with a Green Teamer everywhere across all of our venues throughout Denver, and they were fantastic. We've also worked on some other events that you might recognize. A couple years ago, Jane Goodall was named the Grand Master for the Rose Parade. And so it was important for the Rose Parade to make sure that we were walking the talk, that the parade and the game were walking the talk. So we did a sustainability analysis for both the Rose Bowl game and the parade. And it was the first time that they had ever done that. And that's, you know, a very, very old institution that has a lot of love and respect for it by the surrounding community and by viewers across the world. So it was the first time ever that there was a sustainability page, which is still up on their website, that talks about what they're doing. We also implemented a sustainability plan for the 2016 ESPY Awards. So if you're a sports person, you know what that is. If you're not a sports person, it's basically like the Academy Awards of sports. It's ESPN's award show. And we also work with a local environmental nonprofit called Global Green, and they do a pre-Oscar party every year. That's both a fundraiser for the organization, but it's also a great way to connect Hollywood superstars as they're in town for the Oscars, especially the ones who care about the environment, to the cause. our flagship event. It's the only project that we do that we funded, we curated. It's kind of what I call our passion project. So we founded it, it's going into its 10th year next year, called the Women in Green Forum. And what it is it's an annual conference series held every year in Los Angeles in August to highlight women's impact on the environmental industry and to encourage more women into the field. So how it came about is about 10 years ago, we found ourselves producing a number of environmental conferences and trade shows for clients. And for whatever reason, when we looked at the program agenda and who was at the podium, it was about 95% male speakers. And then when we looked into the audience, we saw a similar ratio. And I was off stage talking to one of the keynotes for this clean tech conference, clean tech environmental conference that we were producing. He was showing me photos of his new daughter, and we were having a great conversation. And he looked out in the audience and he was like, Jamie, where are the women? Like, I want my daughter to grow up and be someone like you. I want her to care about the environment. I want her to have a role here. And I'm looking at the speakers, I'm looking in the audience, and I don't see her in the audience. And I said, you're exactly right. And you know, I happen to have a team of majority women. And so I said to him, you know, I wish there was a way for us to influence both who our clients book to speak and to also who they outreach to and who's in the audience. And he said, you need to do something about it. And so I took the charge from him. I said, John, you're right. And so I said, we're going to do something about it. We're going to self-fund this and see where it goes. And so we produced the first conference at the Pasadena Convention Center 9 years ago. And it was a huge event. It attracted about 450 attendees. We had a huge trade show, concurrent sessions. It had a lot of energy. And so we've built on that ever since. We do issue a Trailblazer Award, a Lifetime Trailblazer Award every year. We've had folks that you might know, like Mary Nichols from the State Air Resources Board, receive that award. But then we also decided to award a Youth Trailblazer Award from the second year on. And I have to tell you, the Youth Trailblazer Award presentation and that speech that's given is usually the most powerful moment throughout the day. We've found some young women who are doing amazing things and who have been doing amazing things since they were like 13 and they're now 17 or 18. And when professionals in the audience see that, it almost motivates them to do more because they're like, if she can do that and she's only 17 or 18 and she has, like, I need to kick into high gear. What it also did is it allowed us, through a partnership with American Honda, to build out a youth leadership program. So now we give out about 40 to 50 scholarships for students. We've had some high school, but mainly college, undergrad, and graduate students attend the conference every year for free. And so for these students, it's usually their first ever professional conference. So they're nervous, they have anxiety, they don't know what to wear, they don't have a business card, they don't know how to act, what it's going to be like, what to expect. So we built out a mentorship program where when the professional attendees register for the conference, they can click, I want to be a mentor, and they can read about what the program entails. And so we do a one-to-one matching of college student to mentor. And then pre-conference, so from 8 to 9 in the morning, they meet their mentee and mentor, and they do a 1-hour session with them. So that way they have a buddy who walks them through the conference, and then that buddy stays with them for that year. And a lot of times it's lasted way beyond that. We hear from mentees and mentors that they've gotten jobs, internships, helped them through transitions of majors and where to go after college and those types of things. But we've sent a couple hundred students through this program now, and it's definitely probably one of the most rewarding aspects of what we do every year. We also post on campus groups, and so if anyone here knows of campus groups, or if UC Office of the President can post, we definitely want students. We get students from all across even the globe. We've had some international students attend, but the scholarship application's up online at womeningreenforum.com, and any student, and men are open to this conference as well too. I wanted to make sure that's clear, but any student can apply to be part of that program. Another event we worked on focused on how tech is changing the future for good, hopefully, and that was called the Near Future Summit, and that was held in San Diego in 2016 and 2017. Taking it a couple of years back, I don't know how many of you are Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert fans? Anyone? Yeah, a couple, okay. Well, do you remember this rally to restore sanity? It took place in the National Mall in DC, and basically what it was is Jon Stewart on air live said, you know what, we need to have a rally. We're going to invite all of our fans to come. It's going to be in a month on the National Mall, and then cameras cut. And basically MTV Viacom looked at this and said, what? Like, he didn't get approval for this, there was no plan for this, there was no budget for this, but he called it out on live TV on his show, so it had to happen, right? So they hired an event producer. Luckily, the event producer is one that we had worked with before on an event at the G20 for clean energy, and they said, we have 4 weeks to plan this massive rally on the National Mall. They talked to Comedy Central, and they said, it's going to be a mess. Like, if we have 500,000, 1 million people on the National Mall, it's going to be a mess. We have to look at a green event plan. And they said, do you know someone? And they said, yes, 3 Squares. So they had us get on a quick call with Comedy Central's head of sustainability to talk through a plan. They said, can you do this? It was now 3 weeks left on the clock. I said, we can try, we can do the best that we can do, but we need to get started ASAP. And so we started. And we mapped out a plan with the National Park Police, with all of the different security forces that were going to be on the park's grounds that day. We mapped out a massive push for public transit because we wanted to make sure that these 500,000 people didn't all drive or create gridlock on the street. And then we implemented a waste diversion plan as well. And so what ended up happening is there were recorded 850,000 people on the mall that day. It was a massive event. We also broke a public transit record in DC for a Saturday. So there were articles about that. And then there was another article that came out in the press that this was the event that had left the National Mall cleanest out of any event that was ever held there, which we felt great about. And our Green Team volunteers and Green Team felt great about as well. We were also pulled into the movie premiere for the Inception movie, which was Leonardo DiCaprio's movie a couple years back. And it was at a historic venue, the Hollywood Chinese Theater, and then the El Capitan Theater across the way. So that was the first time that any event at the Grauman's Chinese Theater or the El Capitan had ever had a greening process. So we implemented compost, recycling, et cetera, and it was a great success. So we were happy to be part of that as well. So that's a little bit about me. The reason why I named this I call it a workshop, called Shaping Your Impact, is I wanted to explain kind of what my career journey has been like and what I do, because a lot of people are confused by it. But then I wanted to actually talk to you in the audience, both here in the room and then on the phone, about how there might be ways that you could shape your impact. And this is a workshop that I give around the world. I did it in Mexico City and Berlin this year. Next year will be Tokyo and Brisbane and a couple of other places with Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. So this is just a snippet from that workshop. But where I like to start is focusing on the pebble, if you will, that can have a ripple effect of you as an individual, or your individual impact. And research has shown that individuals make about 35,000 decisions, some micro or mini, some macro or major, every day. So if you think about that, it can be everything from what you're going to put on, what you're going to wear, what toothpaste you're going to use, how you're going to get to work or to school and back, if you're going to bring a water bottle or not. It could be how you sit, your posture, who you're friends with, all of those types of things. But when you start to think about those decisions, you can think about how you can make them with a sustainability or environmental lens or social lens or not, right? So some of those decisions could be where to live, what to wear, what to drive, or should you drive or walk or bike or scoot or any of the other ways to get to and from, what to eat, where to work. Do you want to pick a place to work that might have the same values, whether it's social or environmental, that you feel, or do you want to pick a place to work where you feel like you can go inside and start to make changes from the inside out? What causes do you want to support? Are there nonprofit causes that you want to donate to or volunteer? Where do you want to shop, especially relevant in this giving or Christmas or holiday season? what to say. So your words are really, really powerful. They're also powerful online, right? So they used to only be powerful when you're talking to someone or being recorded like we are now. But now when you post online, you don't know who is going to take into consideration what you're saying. And then I say to swipe left or right, also very important decisions. When you look at those decisions, you can definitely start to make an impact as an individual. But when you look at the industry that you work in, there's also a way to have an impact, right? And I was giving this workshop in Denver 2 years ago, and after I gave the workshop, a woman came up to me and she said, I work in the Bitcoin industry. I'm not sure where to begin. And I said, I knew nothing about Bitcoin. I knew nothing then. I know this much now. But I said, I do know about how to implement environmental strategies. Let's talk. And so I went through the example with her of how I helped be part of a core of volunteers from the events industry to make change, right? And where I went with her is to start to look at, are there any types of standards, certifications, task forces, committees, similar to how you've created this committee or advisory committee on the status of women, does anything exist within your industry or your passion area focused on environmental? With the meetings and events industry, we could have a huge impact, right? So just looking at the US alone, there are about 18 million events every year. So that contributes to about $115 billion to the national GDP. And at the time, there were no standards existed. No committees existed, no industry organizations. We weren't organized at all. It was just kind of one-off people who were passionate, were doing their thing here and there to eliminate plastic water bottles, or it was very one-off. So we started to map out what it would look like to create standards. And I mentioned we built out ISO 2012-1 standard and the APEX ASTM standard. After those standards started to take shape, then other industry groups started to build out certifications. Everyone wants to get a certification. They want to be able to add a new seal or a new certificate onto their website or to their company, et cetera. So it really helps to push along with that peer pressure component. Well, that company has it, we need to have it. Or that event's doing it, we need to do it, right? And then industry associations started to develop. So GMIC, the Green Meeting Industry Council, was one, and then SEA out of Australia, the Sustainable Event Alliance, was another one. Does anyone recognize this image? Okay, so this is a rendering of potentially what the LA 28 Olympics could look like. The cool thing about this, not only is it, I'm from LA, so we're very happy that LA won the bid, but ever since the London 2012 Olympics, the IOC has said when they go out to bid for cities to host Olympics, that you have to have an ISO 2012-1 compliance strategy as part of your bid. So they just by making that request and saying, look, if you want to host the Olympics, LA, Paris, Tokyo, wherever you are, you have to make sure you have an environmental management plan or an ISO 2012-1 plan. It caused a ripple effect of all of these major cities trying to figure out what the heck is that? How do we do that? And how can we compete? And how do we get the knowledge to do so? What it also did is, so again, that's the standard, right? Having the International Olympic Committee start to request that in their bid application process. And then now, industry associations like the Green Sports Alliance developed to say, okay, let's create that type of knowledge base and that type of commitment within the sports industries. And so they now have, this number goes up every day, so at least 400 members, 193 professional sports teams, 194 venues, so those are not small venues, those are big stadiums or arenas, and 16 leagues of professional sports teams committed to go green or committed to implement environmental strategies. Think about what that means if they roll out something that's like a fan program, right? We're at all the games this year, we're going to promote whether it's no straws or no plastic water bottles or any of those campaigns. They're reaching millions of people. And again, it's people that might not be necessarily ones who would seek out a message about environment. What that did is it also started to create a ripple effect around stadium builds. So I'm going to give you a few of my favorite examples. This one is from Taiwan, the National Stadium. It was completed in 2009, and it's their famed dragon-shaped stadium, 100% solar powered with the help of 8,000 plus solar panels on their roof. The stadium also replanted the trees that were removed during construction. Rainwater harvesting and flood prevention technologies were also used. So that's what it looks like. It's a gorgeous building, and you can see that even from a design perspective, they're leading with the solar as part of their design on the dragon's tail there across the whole roof. Another example is, again, one of my favorites because it combines social and environmental, which to me is and economic, which is the triple threat. So this is in Rio, in Brazil. It was the idea and instigated by the football legend Pelé, soccer legend, and it's the world's first football pitch or field to convert the players' movements into energy. So what it means is as the players are bouncing around on the field, there are 200 kinetic tiles that capture that energy, and then the electricity that it creates powers 6 LED floodlights in the nearby favela so that children can play safely at night. So while people are playing on the field, the lights are being powered outside, and that was one of the main issues of safety, is that they didn't have lights, street lights. Next, looking at your global impact. So we go around the world as part of the Climate Reality Project, and we train people to be climate leaders. So that's one program I wanted to just mention. We just had a training for 2,500 attendees in Los Angeles in August. And then we're having our next US training is in Atlanta next year. And then we have Tokyo and Brisbane. But basically, we've trained over 14,000 people around the world to be climate leaders. And they're people like you and me, they're everyone, they're teachers, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're carpenters, they're just folks who care about the environment, and they were looking for some way of capturing their passion and their care and kind of channeling it into positive results. So this is what we do for Climate Reality, but I encourage you, if you are interested, to check out local environmental groups within your cities or within your neighborhoods. Again, if something doesn't exist, a lot of times, especially within cities or smaller budget cities, if they're not a big staff city, they're looking for volunteers to just raise their hand and say they're interested. And I've seen people start up like committees or task forces within a city, and then they get hired on to be the sustainability director of the city. Like, they basically create their own job, which is brilliant. I also, whenever I speak to college students or just anyone, I mentioned earlier before we started that I get about 5 to 10 emails a week asking for career advice or informational interviews. My cousin, my daughter, my sister, my neighbor wants to get into the field. Can they talk to you? I wish I could talk to everyone, but I have a very busy schedule. So what I decided to do is to create a LinkedIn article that I posted on my LinkedIn, and it's called Looking to Jumpstart Your Environmental Career, You Are Not Alone. And it talks about how there's a big trend of people looking to get into the space, and there's a wealth of opportunity in a lot of different areas. So on this blog post, I list different job-seeking resources. I have some other articles that also talk about ways to ready yourself for a career in the environment. But I'm always open to connect on LinkedIn, and I tell every college student, I just spoke to UCLA's undergraduate class of about 200 in sustainability, and I said, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Like, this is a freebie. Add me and add everyone you meet, and that becomes your professional network. And you'd be surprised, a lot of students don't even have a LinkedIn profile yet. And so I feel like I'm the first person who's telling them, like, get ready, get your LinkedIn profile up to speed, because that's essentially your resume and your calling card. But I definitely would encourage you to be open to students and young people connecting on LinkedIn as well. I think we need to help the next generation find their way to employment, because I think employment isn't the way that it was, 15, 20 years ago. So that's what I have for my prepared remarks, but I would love to open it up to questions from the in-person audience or online as well. Yes.
You talked a lot about events, and obviously, system-wide, we have a lot of events at campus, but as you also know, we purchase a lot of things. I think we spend about $8 billion a year on goods and services. And so you talked a little bit about your role, your company's role in, like, helping organizations such as the university make sure that they're doing sustainability when it comes to their purchases.
Yeah, definitely. So the question, just for those online, I'm going to repeat for the mic, was I talked a lot about events, but how do we look at purchasing, especially from a university-wide or campus-wide or Office of the President-wide perspective, because billions of dollars are spent on purchasing every year. So usually when we work with a company or an organization or a city, a lot of what we do when we're doing the analysis side is see where the spend is, and then to implement processes and policies so that we're applying this lens over the spend. What typically a city or a large organization develops is called an EPP, or Environmental Procurement Policy, which means that when the most common items that are going to be purchased are, when they're going out for purchase, that they have to go through these steps, right? So the easiest example to call out would be paper, especially when we're working with law firms or organizations that have a heavy office footprint. So we set a standard in terms of both percentage of recycled content and then where that paper is sourced from. Same thing, I know there are IT representatives in the room. So electronic purchasing is a big one, because you can both purchase electronics that have energy saving features, or the EPA has an EPEAT rating, EPEAT rating, but then you can also look to purchase electronics that were designed for disassemble or processing as electronic recycled material. If you don't have that lens in place, you're purchasing both electronics that were built that were not built to have energy saving mode, and that their end of life is essentially a landfill. So what we've tried to do is build in those processes into an environmental procurement policy. So if it's something that you're not aware of, that you don't have, I would definitely recommend, and we'd be happy to work with you all to recommend building out that type of policy. A lot of times what follows building out a policy like that is training the procurement officers or the buyers, right? So we've developed, like for one of our automotive clients, we've developed online training platforms to train both their suppliers, their supply chain and their suppliers, and how to comply to their sustainability goals, both in complying and reporting back to the company. And then we've also trained their buyers online. And so that helps both, you get the policy in place, and then you have to have the training. And then if there are new people hired into the role, that training is part of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So you started off your undergraduate and graduate career more on international economics, international trade, and I'm just curious how you got into working more on the environment. And can you also touch upon the two other pieces of the three squares? Because your talk was generally focused more on the environmental side of things.
Yep.
Can you also kind of share some example of how you also look at the social and the economic aspect in your policy?
I'm happy to. So the question was, I started my talk out with my educational background in international economics and international trade and public policy. So how did I land in environment? And then can I talk about social and economic in terms of the other two legs of the three squares? So my career path was not linear. And I will mention that the experience with jazz reggae and I kind of, reached my as commissioner my junior year, which is usually something that seniors go for. So what ended up happening, it's a funny story, is a lot of the reggae artists that I met on the 3 years of building the festival reached out to me and said, we want booking and management, we want to work with you, you should start a company. So my very first entrepreneurial effort was starting a company that managed reggae artists from Jamaica, and I had that company for 7 years. So I managed and routed tours for artists from Jamaica, but reggae artists. So that was my first company that I started at the beginning of my senior year of college. After I graduated, though, while I had that company going on the side, I got a job with the city of Santa Monica, and I ran community programs. One of the programs that I ran, in addition to programs for seniors and youth and Special Olympics and volunteers, was environmental programs. And I ran this event called Coastal Cleanup Day, which was the largest beach cleanup in California, and worked closely with local environmental groups. While I was at the city, I went back to get my master's as well. I worked for 2 years and decided to enroll in my master's, my third year of working for the city. I chose a master's in public policy because I knew that I wanted to find a way to affect change on the landscape around me. I didn't think law was the right track for me. At the time, there weren't career tracks for sustainability or master's programs or MBAs in sustainability like there are now. And so I decided to go the public policy route. And then while I was in school, I saw a job opening for Director of Events and Marketing at an environmental consulting firm. That firm worked heavily with the maritime industry and the ports and goods movement. And I was like, wow, this is great. It's a connection to international trade, but it has the impact focus, which is what I was looking for. So in a way, I was a little bit before my time, because now, you know, there's so much focus on impact investing, sustainability. All of those buzzwords weren't really in vogue back then, but I always followed my passion. I think that's kind of the through line, whether it's reggae music tied to a message, or whether it's environmental and impact, or the work that I did in Santa Monica with seniors and youth and Special Olympics. I later served on the board for Special Olympics. So social and environmental were two areas that were always in my life. I worked my way up to the VP level of this environmental consulting firm, got super involved in the ports, environmental activities within the ports and goods movement. So I served on the environmental committee for the American Association of Port Authorities for 3 years. Pretty much taught myself everything that I needed to know about reducing emissions from all aspects of intermodal trade. So that's shipping, ocean-going vessels, off-road equipment, on-road equipment, or trucking, rail, etc. And I loved it, but I felt like it was very focused on just transportation, clean transportation, and ports. And I felt like it wasn't giving me the breadth that I wanted to focus on in terms of really rolling out sustainability plans and helping organizations move forward. And so I decided to go off on my own in 2008, ripe time of the economic depression, and started my business. And it was the best decision ever, because not only did it allow me to spread my, really work on the types of projects that I want to work on, it gave me the platform to do it, and to do it in my own way, right? And this is year 10, and this year was our most productive, highest grossing year on the books. So we've done something right. A lot of my team has been with me for 7-8 years as well, so I've grown a really solid, amazing team that I'm super grateful for. Couldn't do it without them. And a lot of our projects tie into environmental, social, and the economic piece is we won't work on something if it doesn't make economic sense. So we are a for-profit consulting firm. I need to make sure that we get paid for our work fairly. I need to pay my staff fairly, but I also want to make sure that we don't push our clients into a direction that won't make economic sense for them. So we would never advise a corporate client, a city client, a nonprofit client to do something that doesn't have environmental and social gains, but also we don't want to hurt them economically. It has to be cost neutral or gains, right? So that's the economic piece. On the social piece, a lot of our projects, I would say every project, it touches people in some way. So there's a project I didn't mention that we did for the city of Riverside, where we teamed up with an environmental engineering firm. They were hired to do the climate action plan, or the greenhouse gas inventory, and then we were hired, so 50-50, we were hired to do an economic development plan tied to the greenhouse gas reductions that they were seeking, right? And so that process involved 2 years of working with the city of Riverside, developing out stakeholder groups that included Seniors Go Green, all of the churches, the 3.5 universities there, many different 3 chambers of commerce focused on different industries, the agriculture community, etc. And we did 2 years of workshops to make sure that we were developing an economic development plan that had an environmental focus, but also met the needs of the communities and the diverse needs of the community there. So that's a great example of how we don't just look for environmental gains at the cost of everything else. Is there anything online? Questions? Okay. Anything else in the room? I know we have, yep.
I'm thinking about the recent fires.
Yes.
And then people are driven into shelters, and thinking of a tie-in to your event planning. Have you any experience or ideas around how to green those kinds of responses?
So the question is about the recent fires and people, or emergencies in general, where people are driven into shelters and how those could be greened based off of our event experience. So we haven't worked on that directly, but we have a lot of folks that I know and partners who have developed solutions, both for, I have a group of colleagues that are working with a refugee camp in Kenya about both housing solutions and kind of economic development solutions that have an environmental component as well, because a lot of the shelters that are used, even, whether it's refugee camps, so it could be short-term / mid-term / long-term, or the very short-term shelters that FEMA or other agencies use, are not designed in a way, they're not designed in a way both from even to be of good use when they're up, let alone when they're disassembled, right? So there's a lot of work being done. There's a group called Architecture for Humanity that is focused on how can we build better so that not only is it built in a way where if it needs to stand for 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years, it can, but after its end of life or end of use, it can be turned into something else and someone can use it, right? Because we have a major housing shortage in LA, as I know you do. We have a housing shortage here, but in terms of all over the world, housing people in a way that not only is good for them but good for the environment is something that's a huge challenge and opportunity. I'll just mention quickly, because I have friends who are at Airbnb as well. They've done a lot to work with both the refugee crisis and then emergency disaster, and how we can maximize the housing stock that we have within their host community and even open it up to non-hosts, so that during times of crisis, they're able to take people in, basically, and take people in for free. So that's something to look at as well.
Any other questions? And nothing online? All right, so let's give a big hand for Jamie. We'll try to post some of that information also on our website, because I think it's really important for us to have that as well.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thanks for those on the line. Our next event will be in the new year, so have a great holiday.